Is there a hidden meaning behind FitLife Brands calling MusclePharm our most significant organic growth opportunity? So I'll decode that introductory statement a bit later in this content, but on May 14th of 2024, FitLife Brands updated the public markets by releasing its 2024 first quarter earnings reports. So I'll be utilizing the financial information from those reports along with the notes I took while listening to the earnings conference call. And finally, any relevant publicly disclosed information to obviously update you on the recent performance of the FitLife Brands portfolio, but also utilize everything to provide further context for my expanded strategic commentary on trends that are happening within the nutritional supplement space. For those of you that are new to my FitLife Brands content that might not be too familiar with the business, it is made up of supplement brands that are now categorized within four segments. NDS products, which are a collection of brands mostly sold through the GNC franchise system. Isotory products, which are a collection of brands sold through a diversified retail mix. Mimi's Rock Corporation products, which are a collection of brands sold mostly through Amazon, and then the recently acquired MusclePharm. In total, the FitLife Brands portfolio is sold through about 20,000 retail locations globally, but let's dive into a quick financial breakdown. In the first quarter of 2024, FitLife Brands had revenue of $16.5 million, which was up 54% year over year and up around 24% on a quarter over quarter sequential basis. Now, on face value, that obviously appears impressive, but you had both the Mimi's Rock and MusclePharm acquisitions that happened in 2023 and greatly impacted the comparable growth percentage. Next quarter, acquisition related impact to growth calculations will be minimized as Mimi's Rock was acquired at the very end of February 2023. But FitLife Brands did put together a pro forma report that shows total revenue would have been down 8.5% year over year if the Mimi's Rock deal had occurred on January 1st of 2023. And that decline seems to be coming from the skincare brands that make up around 10% of the Mimi's Rock segment. But overall, the Dr. Tobias brand, which represents the remaining 90 or so percent of total sales, did return to growth during the quarter, despite FitLife Brands cutting advertising spend by 39% year over year. It was also noted that the Dr. Tobias subscriber count started to grow again after being largely stagnant for more than 2 years. But if we strip out the Mimi's Rock and MusclePharm contributions, the legacy FitLife Brands segment collectively had a 14% decrease in quarterly revenue, which was driven by a 21% decrease in wholesale revenue, but partially offset by a 3% increase in online revenue. And that might be a good transition to talk about the sales channel mix of FitLife Brands because it has been a major focus of the company's leadership over the last 5 or so years. Historically speaking, aka legacy FitLife Brands, these supplement brands generated most of the revenue from the retailer GNC. And by most, I mean like close to 80% at one point, which that key customer risk has been even more problematic with the seemingly episodic business troubles that specialty retailer has experienced over the last like 7 or 8-ish years. But now consider that in the first quarter of 2024, GNC made up slightly less than 3/5 of legacy FitLife Brands revenue and only 25% of the entire portfolio's revenue. The diversification of the legacy FitLife Brands segment has come from additional focus being placed on e-commerce. Additionally, consider the legacy FitLife Brands. We don't want to step on GNC franchise's playbook that avoids channel conflict by pricing products higher on Amazon, and that segment revenue diversification effort should feel a bit more impressive. Moreover, adding the Amazon-focused Mimi's Rock segment into the mix and FitLife Brands would now actually be considered a digital-first supplement brand portfolio because about 65% of this quarter's revenue came from e-commerce. Going forward, FitLife Brands expects to continue growing online revenue across all portfolio brands, but last October's $18.5 million acquisition of the bankrupt MusclePharm brand could become problematic to this more desirable sales channel mix as its biggest opportunities are expected to be within the wholesale side. And maybe this is a good transition into me detailing how the MusclePharm segment performed recently, and I'll kind of start by sharing a clip from last quarter to recap my revenue predictions. MusclePharm's business really didn't begin ramping up in terms of both wholesale and online sales until this current first quarter of 2023. Because of that, FitLife Brands gave some additional forward looking statements based on preliminary first quarter numbers to show the early turnaround progress at MusclePharm. Sticking with the online side of revenues first, FitLife Brands has indicated that MusclePharm generated an estimated just over $1 million. That process of rebuilding the MusclePharm business reputation and brand on retail shelves is going to take time. That makes predicting wholesale revenue a bit tougher, but my guess is that in Q1 will be somewhere around $1.25 million, making the total quarterly revenue at MusclePharm around $2.25 million. So the actual MusclePharm quarterly revenue in the first quarter was $2.1 million, of which approximately half was generated from wholesale customers and the other half from online. So that prediction from last quarter ended up not being too shabby for a washed up finance guy that doesn't have any financial modeling software and just kind of does chicken scratch math in his head when he's creating these videos. And if you were wondering about year over year comparatives, let's just say the Eric Hillman run MusclePharm bankrupt version outsold this current version. But that's probably an apples to oranges comparison because Eric Hillman was focused on survival by any means necessary, and FitLife Brands is attempting to make strategic business decisions that support and optimize long-term growth. So that required FitLife Brands to renegotiate new agreements and or reestablish relationships with MusclePharm's existing wholesale customers and supply side partners. Additionally, FitLife Brands is still not the exclusive seller on the entire Amazon catalog of MusclePharm product listings, though leadership stated on the earnings call that only around 4% of sales are coming from the previous third-party seller as they sell through their inventory without price competition. Despite that, MusclePharm revenue on Amazon is growing month over month, with platform subscriber growth continuing to be strong. And what might be helping that, at least as of late, is the return of MusclePharm's Combat protein bars that were relaunched in April, with early demand and review and ratings on Amazon being good. So I'd still think the brand's year one conservative revenue floor is about $5 million on the online marketplace, but are positive early indicators of this quote unquote MusclePharm brand revival setting up FitLife Brands for a reality check soon? Let's kind of revisit a little bit more of my thoughts from last quarter. But I'm fearing that FitLife Brands might be getting excited about early indicators of sales performance, getting overly confident, and might be getting caught up in the last and biggest part of that old MusclePharm sales playbook, launching more and more new SKUs. So what has me all up in arms? We already heard previously from FitLife Brands leadership that they would relaunch some historically successful MusclePharm products. I stated that they needed to focus on rebuilding the Assault Energy platform and refining the Combat Protein platform. While I didn't explicitly state this, I meant in the ready-to-mix powder form factor. That's because FitLife Brands are good operators with solid track records of driving sales inside specialty supplement retailers. And while they sell a legacy SKU or two in large retailers, they are not proficient in those sales channels. So if they move into ready to eat or, God forbid, ready to drink form factors again anytime soon, they would need to significantly retool their sales leadership and organizational structure to make a categorical impact. So interestingly enough, CEO Dayton Judd first took a jab at my comment about launching more and more products by stating on the earnings call that they plan on focusing on a few previously successful products instead of launching 15 new products. But then in the same breath, he went down that product format no-no zone I mentioned around RTD beverages, stating, "We're evaluating a lot of trends towards ready to drink, whether that's an energy drink or a protein beverage. We are not close to pulling the trigger on either one of those, with, I think, an energy drink being maybe one of the last horizons we would look at." Ironically, that's the investment that put MusclePharm into bankruptcy. So we'd be more likely to do a protein RTD beverage right now. So interestingly enough, protein RTD beverages were the categorical focus of the last consulting project engagement I had with MusclePharm back in early 2020. But that doesn't mean I'm bullish on it right now, which is kind of the same timing commentary that would apply to the Muscle Farm protein bars. In fact, I would be strategically conservative for at least the next 12 to 18 months to rebuild the foundation for future growth opportunities at Muscle Farm. So that strategic game plan would be focused on energy and protein powders that are sold mostly on Amazon and online, but within select specialty retailers and maybe a few of the easier international markets. And then the rest of the available FitLife brands resource allocation would be spent on rebuilding the brand story to end consumers and then also rebuilding the trust with wholesale customers through making sure we had operational excellence. That's it. Boring, right? Which this maybe relates to my introductory statement of FitLife brand stating Muscle Farm is our most significant organic growth opportunity. I think last quarter I said Muscle Farm was the most intriguing segment within FitLife brands because the rest of the portfolio is boring. And I'm sorry to be so blunt, but it's absolutely true. You have the legacy FitLife brand segments that are primarily tied to specialty retail, which is a categorical sales channel that continues to see sharp declines in performance. Additionally, you have an Amazon brand where the most exciting opportunity right now is launching a fiber colon cleanse powder. So the Muscle Farm turnaround opportunity is like saying it's the brightest brown crayon in the box. Muscle Farm that I left more than a dozen years ago has deteriorated significantly since those golden years when I was a part of the sports nutrition brand's hypergrowth phase. In fact, the chance of getting back to the heyday of Muscle Farm, both from an influence impact and revenue perspective, is really a statistical anomaly. Yet, the last 5 to 7 years of Muscle Farm brand mismanagement has provided a sizable amount of unlocked value that's just waiting to come out. That being said, FitLife Brands is obviously a publicly traded company and one that just recently got uplisted. So it wants to continue getting interest from large institutional investors. Where I'm going with this is down two paths that both point back to the fact that there shouldn't really be a rush here in trying to turn around Muscle Farm. The first direction I want to go with this is around analyzing potential impacts to margin. And in the first quarter, FitLife Brands had gross margins of 44%, which was up 190 basis points year over year. That is a strong comparative improvement. But remember, this barely includes anything Muscle Farm related in terms of the April protein bar launch that we already know about, but also probable future channel category format strategic game plan. Moreover, if FitLife Brands rushes strategic growth plans at Muscle Farm, either by getting overly aggressive to land placements at large retailers or expand protein category formats further soon, it will also be forced into higher promotional spend. So, to not fail miserably, that will further wreck margin profiles, that is, until scale is reached and operating leverage kicks in. But then the second path revolves around potentially finding easier growth through mergers and acquisitions opportunities. Even with two sizable acquisitions in the last year, FitLife Brands is already generating enough free cash flow to feed overall portfolio growth and simultaneously reduce its indebtedness. Moreover, I think integration of these deals are almost at a sufficient stage that FitLife Brands can pull the trigger on additional acquisition opportunities. Here's the good news, though, about the supplement industry that the CEO is also very aware of. It's highly fragmented with a collection of relatively good brands that have bad financials. That provides a great upside opportunity from market consolidation. But that easier growth path only works if FitLife Brands doesn't go trash picking again on its next asset. But who knows? Maybe they do something silly like grab Glaxon out of bankruptcy. But I hope you enjoyed this YouTube video. If you did, consider hitting that like button to support me. Also help me get to my new short-term goal of 4,000 subscribers by hitting that subscribe button. I'd love to see you join me on this journey, but we need to fix the fact that slightly more than I think 90% of you that are watching this YouTube video right now are not subscribed to my channel, and that makes me extremely sad. But I do want to thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you on the next one.